Okay, so we continue right along with the nishtana, and we're studying the nishtana. It says on all other nights we do not even dip one time, but on this night we dip twice. So this is a strange question, because anybody who's ever been to a restaurant in Israel knows they bring up the salatim, and everybody does the dipping at the beginning. So what do you mean on all other nights we don't even dip one time? We do a lot of dippings. So the Ritva explains, it means in all other nights we do not dip even once before the meal. But on this night, we dip twice before the meal. Once with the karpas and once with the maror. With the maror, we dip in the charoset. Another answer, this is from the Orchos Chaim of Lunel, that's Provence. He says, on all other nights when we eat vegetables, we don't look for a dip. But on this night, we try to find something to dip it in twice. Okay. Well, that's what we're going to get to. Well, the dipping, there's a lot of significance to it, but the karpas, the dipping, some say reminds us of Joseph dipping when they dipped Joseph's coat. So there's a lot of discussion about the significance of the dipping, but we'll see what they say here. The another answer, this comes out from the medieval Germanists. They write that on all other nights we don't make a blessing on the dipping, because we eat the bread beforehand. But on this night, we make a blessing on the two dippings, even though on one before the bread and one after the bread. And the bread and the blessing, the motzi, doesn't solve anything. So that's what we're asking about. And then the Midrash, Rabbi David HaNagid. You know who that is? Do you know who Rabbi David HaNagid is? Oh, let's look him up. This is a very famous person. Rabbi David HaNagid. I'm going to read who he is. Oh, he is the Rabbi David HaNagid is the grandson of Maimonides. But do you know who Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid is? Okay, let me tell you who that is. Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid he died in 1056, and he was a general. He was a commander of the Grenadian army. He was a medieval Sephardic Jewish Talmudic scholar who also served as a general. And since we're talking about Spanish people, I'm going to share this with you. Yeah. Well, listen to this. So Christopher Columbus, maybe you didn't know this because I drove up to the eclipse. In Columbus, when he was coming to the New World, and he went to Jamaica, and the people there were threatening him, and they were watching them starve, and they were imprisoning them. And Columbus said to them, I can prove to you that I have special powers. Tonight, the moon is going to be covered over at this time. And they were so impressed that they thought he was like a god or a demigod, and they gave him all the food he needed. But Columbus writes in his diary, this is a fact. It's not like some sort of myth. It's a fact. He writes in his diary that he was aware of this information because he read the works of Rabbi Abraham Zacuto, who listed all of the eclipses. So Columbus based himself upon the works of Rabbi Abraham Zacuto. At least that's what he writes in his diary. I read the article in Wikipedia, and some people say, no, he didn't really find it there. He found it in a different source. But the question is then, why did he attribute it to a rabbi?
Columbus means Jonah in Latin.
Spain. Surely that's not coincidental. So there's a lot of Jewish concept. Yeah. Maybe a couple of rabbis on the board. Possible. So the Midrash Rabbi David HaNagid explains that when it says Mat Pilim, that on this night we dip most nights we don't even dip once, but this night we dip twice. It says this is a radical explanation. He says this refers to not dipping something in the food, but it refers to hello Chaim, come on in, join us. But this refers to washing our hands. Washing the hands, and on all other nights a person is not required to wash his hands before the meal even once. And on this night, we have to wash our hands twice. This is what Rabbi David Nugget says. What? Yeah, we do, of course. On Seder night, we wash our hands. Yeah, twice we wash our hands on Seder night. Yeah, we wash our hands before we break the matzah, and then we wash our hands before we eat the matzah. We wash our hands twice on Seder nights. Exactly. So now another question is, what's the symbolism of the 2 times? That's what Steve asked. Steve asked the symbolism of the dipping twice. So what's the reason why we have to dip twice? So Rashi explains, okay, this is a good one. Obviously, Shoshana is gonna get this, that we dip the first time, so the children will ask, why are we dipping? And some say that we only dip the first time so that we can make a blessing, a Borei Pri Adama, and because we're not sure later on if we should make the blessing on the maror, because we're eating a vegetable. So we dip now to make the blessing. So because it seems a little bit strange to make the blessing on the maror, or you making a blessing on the bitterness. So therefore we make the blessing on this one. There are 3 explanations given by the Tosafos in the commentary called Datsikanim. One is that the 2 times we dip corresponds to the all the people who are participating. Hello, Ezra, how you doing? Hello, Moshe. Amazing. It corresponds to the children and the who are participating in the Karban Pesach. That's the Yelid bias to Miknat Kesef. The second explanation is that it corresponds to the 2 times in the 2 places where they placed the blood on the door in Egypt, meaning to say they placed it on the lintel and on the doorpost. So for this reason, we dip twice. And another answer is it corresponds to the 2 bloods that because of these 2 bloods, here, take the Haggadah, Moshe and Ezra. These 2 bloods allowed us to be redeemed. What are the 2 bloods? The blood of the Paschal lamb and the blood of the circumcision. And because of the mitzvah of the 2 bloods, that's why we were redeemed. We're discussing the nishtana. Right now we're discussing why is it that we dip twice on Seder night. Another answer is that since there's an obligation to discuss on this night the way we left Egypt, therefore we're commanded to do 2 dippings. One before the meal corresponding before they went down to Egypt, and that's the dipping of Joseph's coat in the blood, and that's the reason why they went down. And then the second dipping corresponds to why we were able to be redeemed from Egypt. That corresponds to the Korban Pesach, where we dipped the blood and placed it on the lintel. Another answer is given by the Hasidic Rebbe, the Shem Mishmuel. I think he's the grandson of the Kotzker Rebbe. He says that generally speaking, we would dip the vegetable before we eat for 2 reasons. One, in order to help the meal, I guess, to whet the appetite, and number 2, I don't know, he has some reason which I don't understand. It says so that the sharpness of the vegetable will clean out the stomach from all the moisture that's there from the previous meal, whatever. And so therefore we dip twice, so we're showing that we're cleansing ourselves from any chametz. And then we dip again to let the matzah go right. Okay. No, to help the matzah be absorbed properly. Come on, don't be so cynical, please. Yes, Shoshana. A literal, right, I know. Okay, so I was teasing. Okay. Then we have the next question is, oh, wow. I didn't even realize this. Woo-hoo-hoo. I'm going to get to something big in a moment. I can't, just wait a moment till we get there. I don't want to get there too early. What is the expression tibul? Tibul, which means to dip. So some say that the word, many commentaries say tibul means eating. That it means just eating. But Tosfos writes that means, okay, just dipping. Okay, now, how did the children know we dipped twice? At this point, we've only dipped once. So how does the child who's asking the question know that we dipped twice? Good question, right? Maybe he remembers from last year. They don't say that because the first year, how did he know? So what does he say? So some answer that he sees the mar there, and he knows we're going to dip it in the charoset. Another answer is it's not only children who ask these questions. The nishtana, this is proof that the nishtana was asked by scholars every year. That is not a question for children. It's put out in the form of children, but it's for scholars. And now we come to the question, which will blow your mind if you don't know, if you never heard this. How many times do we dip on Seder night? So the Rambam, Maimonides writes. Anybody know? No. Rabbi Yosef, did you ever hear this? Maimonides writes in his laws of Chametz U'Matzah that on Seder night we dip 4 times. That's a trick question. You could play with everybody at your Seder. Maimonides writes, Arba tibulim yeshnam b'layla hazeh. 4 times. What are the 4 times? The karpas, the vegetable at the beginning, then the matzah, then you have the matzah,
No.
then you have what?
There's no tibul with the matzah. There's maror and korech. That's 3.
Wait till he see what he says. This is what Rambam writes. You could argue with him. Hold on. Okay. So he has the dipping of the matzah, then he has the dipping of the maror, and the dipping of the korech. So that's 4 times. Karpas, matzah, maror, and korech. So the commentaries are bothered by this because in the Mishnah it says explicitly that there are only 2. So first of all, why does he say 4 when it says 2? So they say that the first dipping is here. You can look this up, Rabbi Yosef. You can pull it up. Laws of Chametz U'Matzah, chapter 8, law 2 and 8. Law 2 and 8. You can pull it up. Chapter 8, laws 2 and 8. So the Rashbam explains that the first dipping was for the vegetables that are not maror, and then we dip again with the eating of the matzah, the maror, and the korech. And we consider them in the Mishnah as one. So the Mishnah is doing the same dipping, but he does it as one. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of discussion there. I just thought that was very interesting. Another answer is that Maimonides says that in the time of the temple, they only dipped it twice. But nowadays, we don't have the korban, and so therefore it was changed, and therefore we dipped twice. I mean, in the time of the temple, we dipped 4 times. Anyway, it's very interesting that probably almost everybody at your Seder didn't know that. Let's see here. He's pulling it up. We can read the exact language of the Rambam. He's going to get to it eventually. He's taking his time. Rabbi Yosef. There we go.
Oh, there it is. Okay,
okay, good.
8.
Chapter 8. Okay, here we go. Law 2. Go down. Okay.
English. So he dips the vegetable in charoset. That's not what we do for karpas. And
he says here, wait, they have a footnote there. Wait, go back to the Hebrew. I can't see the Hebrew.
That's why I asked if you wanted. So he says for karpas that you dip it in the charoset.
I don't know. Go to law 8. Go to law 8. Go to law 8. 8. There we go.
So he says outside is in the charoset also.
Okay, so
guess
he
it's,
has the.
Rambam really likes charoset.
All right, we'll go anyway. That's just something to bear in mind. Okay. Next thing is the last question on the of the nishtana. Going back to the last question, on all other nights we sit, or we. There should be one more over there. You got to keep it on you because we now are out of them. Is there none there? Here, Kobe, there's one over here. They're all disappearing. I don't know. I had like 30. Okay. Okay. Get it, Haggadah. Get it, Haggadah. Okay. Then on all other nights, we sit. And all other nights, we sit, whether sitting or we eat, whether sitting or reclining. On this night, we entirely recline. So that's the last question on the nishtana. So on this night, we entirely recline, which is also not true. We don't recline the whole meal. We only recline at certain times. So let's see how they discuss this. And then we have to discuss, as Steve is going to ask, why do we recline at all? Fine. So Shabbat, let's see what the rabbis say. They used to just sit on couches. That's how they ate their meal. And on all other nights, we eat. Why do they say we eat, but they don't mention drinking? We also are supposed to drink while we're reclining. But that's what we're supposed to do. But that's the law. The law is we're supposed to drink while reclining. Yeah. And so, indeed, the earliest Haggadah says we eat and drink, or one of them. Okay. Another question is, why does it say kulanu misubin? Oh, we're entirely reclining, which is not true. So one explanation is this, that even the waiters are supposed to recline. Also, a son with his father, and a wife with her husband, even if people traditionally were like, usually the reclining was limited to people who were peers. But even if you weren't a peer, you were supposed to recline. But obviously, it's not correct. It's not always. So now we quote Jeff's having descendants of the Barbanel at his Seder. So he says that the reason why it uses this word kulanu is because even small children are supposed to recline. And this shows that we're free. And some say even poor people are supposed to recline. The reclining was a symbol of nobility. So now we have the next question. What's the reason why we recline? So some say that it's to demonstrate that we're free, and some say that we have to eat the whole meal, not just the matzah, but even the whole meal. And the Haggadah Moshe, he writes that on this night, even when we're just telling the story, we're supposed to be reclining. So according to this approach, the ideal way is to recline the whole meal, the whole Seder. If I did that, I'd be asleep. Okay. Now the next question is, why is this question not in the Mishnah? This question is in the Mishnah, is not in the Mishnah. The Mishnah has a different question. When the Mishnah has the nishtana, the earliest version of the nishtana doesn't have the reclining. That was a later question. The Mishnah substitutes it. What? That's what I'm saying. So why? And the Mishnah instead talks about roasted. Okay. So let's before we get to that, there's other questions. Why don't we ask about the charoset and the 4 cups of wine? What's missing from the nishtana? And also, and then there's customs about the nishtana. So let's start with customs about the nishtana, because the first one is, hold on one second. That's very important, but that was, hold on. To tell him. Okay. So the Bnei Yisasvar, the Dinaver, yeah. Okay. So the Bnei Yisasvar, the Dinaver, who we already said was the nephew, the grandnephew of Rabbi Elimelech. His name was Tzvi Elimelech. We spoke about him on Shabbos. He writes that they have the custom in all of Israel to have a special candle on the table. And we call this candle the Ner Manishtana, the Manishtana Licht. Wow, never heard of that custom. So this night we have the Manishtana candle. Did you ever hear of that? He said, "This is now we have to do this because I was at his grave, the Dinaver. I was at the Dinaver's grave, the Bnei Yisasar. You have a special candle in the middle of your table and say this is the Manishtana candle. Wow, I don't know. It's based upon the fact that it says that so some say it's based upon the fact that the child asked Manishtana Laila Zeh. So I don't know. So Laila is like, so it's based upon some reference in the Zohar, some like partial reference. Okay. The Haggadah, according to the Baghdadi tradition, that they have the custom that after say halach ma'anya, the child who takes the afikomen stands up and his father says to him, "Where'd you come from?" And the child says, "I just came from Egypt." And they said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Jerusalem." And he says to him, "And how are you going to get there? What are you going to eat on the way?" He says, "Well, I have the matzah on my back." And then he comes down and immediately asks the manishtana. It's like a little play that they do these things. The Midrash, the Chodesh Aviv writes that before the child asks the manishtana, everybody claps together. And afterwards you start to ask. So they all start to clap. So he heard from the Belzer Rebbe, what's the reason? Because the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, had golden bells around his garment so that they could always hear him when he comes to the temple. And so also now that we're going into the Holy of Holies, before we start the Manishtana, we have to make a sound that we're coming because we're entering into the holiest part of the Seder. So everybody is supposed to do applause before the Manishtana. Yeah, it's for sure the reality. The child's going to think you're applauding for me. What? Yeah. So a lot of interesting customs. Okay, going back to the question, why are there certain things that we're not? Why don't we ask about the charoset and the 4 cups of wine? So why don't we ask about charoset? Because charoset is not that different. You always have dips that you dip in. Like you have a dressing and stuff. It's okay. It's a little different. Another explanation is, and also you drink wine every night. The kids, sometimes you drink 3, 4, but you're always drinking wine. Not me, but people always drink wine. I personally don't like the sulfite. And also, at the time of another answer is that at the time of the Manishtana, they've only drunk 1 cup so far. Well, fine. Okay, the Abarbanel writes, why don't they ask about the 4 cups? Because, this is for Jeff, you have so many things from the Abarbanel, because sometimes we were slaves, used to drink a lot of wine. So it doesn't show we're free. So, okay. Yeah. The other explanation is that the mitzvah of the Manishtana's mitzvos are about, the Manishtana's questions about actual biblical commandments. and the 4 cups of wine is not a biblical commandment, and the charoset is not a biblical commandment. So that's where we didn't ask about it. Okay, I think at this point we've asked enough about the nishtana, and tomorrow we're going to discuss the answers to the nishtana. Even though Shoshana's explanation is very good, that the whole nishtana is an answer, not a question, but we're going to go with the more traditional route and try to do the answers to the nishtana. Very good job, everybody, and we'll pick this up, God willing, tomorrow.